Oh,
He added a newspaper of some type in there.
Number 8 Board of Education meeting. Tonight is of course a very special Board of Education meeting. Tonight is when we introduce our new teachers that have elected to either to join us here in the district, and we certainly want to welcome all of them and recognize all of them in a moment. But first, I'd like to please ask you to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Given that we have so many new teachers and many of their days start very early and some of them start quite early, I'd like, with the board's permission, to move up item number 8.1 to this point in the agenda and ask Dr. Freeman or Mr. Bowden, whichever one of you is going to start this, to please introduce our new teachers.
I'll just say, as Mr. Bowden's heading to the podium, that we again have an exciting, talented group of new staff that we're bringing in this year. We are very excited about the enthusiasm, about the energy, about the skill, about the dedication that we bring in, and I will turn it over to Mr. Bowden, who will introduce all of our new staff members to you this year.
It's my pleasure to introduce the following members of our faculty, our certified staff this year to the district. It was a busy hiring summer. We're very proud to have a very qualified, exciting group of educators in front of our students this year, and I really want to thank the building principals and the teachers that participated in the hiring process throughout the summer. I think you're going to be really impressed with the freshman class of 2014-15. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the following people. Attention to the screen. From A.W. Cox, Caitlin DeStefano, grade 2 teacher. Joyce Galehouse, art teacher. Emily Gay, grade 1 teacher. Jessica Jolene, kindergarten teacher. Caitlin McCarthy, special education teacher. Samantha Talmadge, music teacher. From Calvin Leete School, Principal William Grimm. Grade 4 teacher, Jill Meglin. Grade 2 teacher, Leanne Susi. From Guilford Lake School, Jennifer DiDonato. Misty Moda, kindergarten teacher. Sarah Burke, special education teacher, and Sarah represents the new faculty at Melissa Jones School. Social worker Caitlin Charles. Special education teacher Kristen Coles. Art teacher Teresa Adana Romo. Special education teacher Amy Sevigny. Kindergarten teacher Emily Thomas. From Baldwin Middle School, Principal Douglas Hamill. Science teacher Jennifer Lisi. School psychologist Cassandra Lulai. Science teacher Robert Scopper. From Adams Middle School, Spanish teacher Caroline Barron. Brent Charpentier, social studies teacher. Language arts teacher William Wilson. From Guilford High School, science teacher Michael Barron. Guidance counselor Ashley Dowdish. Social studies teacher David Giglio. Guidance counselor Jillian Carrasca. Math teacher Samantha Lamar. Social studies teacher Christine McGregor. And not pictured is Karen Russo, GHS Mathematics, and Food Service Director Erica Biagetti. So that is our new members of the class of 2014-15. Welcome to the district.
Well, on behalf of the entire board, I want to welcome all of you to Guilford. We're delighted that you've chosen to either begin, some of you, to begin your teaching career with us, or your career otherwise with us, and some of you I know have been in other districts and have chosen to come to Guilford. And we're delighted that you're here. We're happy that you've chosen to share your gifts with us. You've got an important job. We all know that. We're asking a lot of you, but nothing that you wouldn't ask of yourselves. We know that, and we're very happy. We also want to recognize the principals who were involved in such a thoughtful hiring process over the summer. That's a pretty big class, relatively speaking. And
one of the biggest.
Yeah, and so we want to recognize them as well. But thank you, everybody. We look forward to working with you. Anytime we can help, let us know. We have meetings with teachers occasionally from time to time to talk about what your needs are. Because we really do view this as a partnership, and we hope that we'll be able to continue to do that. So thank you and welcome. Now, you can stay if you want. However, you don't get a late pass in the morning, so we do expect you to be there at the normal time. So let's going back to the regular agenda, action on the minutes, August 11 regular meeting. Which one was this? There's two special meetings. One was the residency meeting, which
Yes.
was the latter one.
The 22nd.
Okay. What was the 13th?
That was the public hearing.
That's right.
Public
Okay.
hearing.
All right. So the full board would vote on 3.1 and 3.2. So is there a motion that we approve
So moved.
August 11?
Second.
Any changes, corrections, additions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 3.2 was a full board meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, changes, clarification?
Aye.
And the 3.3 is Mr. Sands, Mrs. Dudley, and myself. Make a motion to adopt.
Aye. So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Aye. So that's three to nothing for the minutes. On item 3.3, Mr. Sands, Mrs. Dudley, and myself vote in favor of the minutes. Item 4. The expenditures for the month of August. We did review these in the operations committee meeting. August, as I learned, I think this is the first time I've ever done them in August. There aren't a lot of bills in August, so I should do this again next year if I can think of it. No, it's there's very few. The salaries are not very high. There's some supplies. There's a lot of site improvements. Interestingly, Mr. Ireland would be happy at all of the site improvements being paid out of the operating budget as opposed to bonding. There were some not unusual special ed expenses, some supplies. We did talk about some of the other specific items in the finance committee meeting or operations committee, but nothing really unusual. So I would make a motion that we approve the expenditures for the month of August.
Second.
And I should say, I guess, in the amount of $2,182,284. So I moved, you seconded.
Right.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Excellent. Public forum for topics on the board agenda. Item 5. Yep.
My name is Marion Breeze, 42 Arrowhead Drive, and the items on the agenda I'd like to address are both the communication issue and the high potential learners study. As you know, I'd written to you and asked for this to be on the agenda somewhere, so I'm going to do it under communication, I suppose. And I timed it. It's 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Have you ever seen us stop anybody at
No,
exactly 3 minutes?
I haven't, but to be fair. So Dr. Freeman, thank you for meeting with me last week regarding my email that I sent to all of you. In our meeting, you had mentioned that there was a conscious decision at the Board of Ed level to shift resources down to the lower grades, that you weren't necessarily comfortable having a first grade class with more students in it than an advanced class at the high school. I hadn't heard it presented that way before our meeting, and tonight or at some time in the near future, I'd like to ask the Board of Education to clarify the district's position on this. I also understand that you're facing pressures from the Board of Finance and that there are limited resources available. I'm disappointed to hear that we lost between 1 and 1.2 teaching positions at the high school, even as we had a budget increase. Looking to next year, I can assure all of you that I and many other parents will work hard so that you can address teaching and staffing needs at every grade. This will be especially important as Mr. Macenti and his team prepare Guilford students, staff, and teachers for working in the new building. Last week, Mr. Macenti told me that the days of 15 students in an AP class are over. I had also heard this from Dr. Freeman last winter, but I'd like to give him the opportunity at some point this evening to clarify or correct me on what the bottom line is on AP class, because I believe he disagreed with that assertion that I had. Having been at the high school for 8 years now as a parent, here's what I see. Number one, the high school needs more staff support, especially with regard to scheduling. I know that GHS staff were here over the weekend working on schedule changes. As of this morning, there are still students sitting in study halls, even after all the paperwork has been approved, and they're just waiting for a computer system to catch up before they can attend one class or another. My son happens to be one of them. More proactive planning needs to be done so that as students progress in their academic pursuits, the next logical opportunities are available. There must be a workable plan for them every step of the way so that they can continue on their path wherever they are. And number two, we need to add sections. 33 students in a math class last year was too many. And a second section was added, but not until after back to school night, as I understand it. 27 students in an English course this year are too many. Is too many? Are too many? I'm not sure. Averages are important, but averages are also somewhat deceptive. You can have an 8 students in one class and 27 students in another. It's not right. More than 15 students on a wait list, add a section. More than a safe number of students in a classroom or in the wood shop, add a section. Let's do better, and let's do it this year. GHS administration and staff spent countless hours on my daughter Allison's schedule with no change. I shudder to think how many hours they spent trying to come up with something better for her, and I'm very grateful. But without the added flexibility of more sections, there was nothing they could do. Had she known this last spring, she would have looked at courses outside of Guilford High School, as shown on this school profile. But by the time she found out there was an issue, it was too late for that opportunity. I understand that 27 students in the AP English class are no longer using the Harkness classroom. I'm sad to hear that. The schedule should have been built with 2 sections, given that at least 2 sections of students were feeding into that course. If you ask the community to invest in training and specialized furniture to facilitate a small class-sized learning environment, you owe it to the community and to the students to make it available to them. Given the way it was presented to the GFFE board all those years ago, the Harkness table classroom should be used most, if not all, periods of the day. I've heard that the administration is planning for attrition in some of the advanced classes, which is understandable up to a point. But imagine from the student perspective how that feels. We're waiting for some students to drop out so we have a manageable sized class. There has to be a better way. If you offer a class to 50 students one year, it's our responsibility as a community to ensure there's enough funding and resources so that those students who do well, who want to take the next step academically, have that opportunity. I'd like to reiterate that when the school profile doesn't match the opportunities available to students, everyone loses. The profile says that students have access to college courses. My daughter didn't. It states that there's independent study credit, which is true, but only up to a point. Allison will be taking 3 independent study courses to prepare for AP exams next spring as a senior. She will not receive AP or honors credit for these courses, and in fact, she'll receive GHS credit for only 2 of those independent study classes. Although her French teacher has generously agreed to help her with her extra studies, the foreign language department won't give her credit for the extra work she's doing, not even half a credit. Her AP exams won't affect her college applications, but that's not why she's doing it. This is a student who loves to learn, and I can assure you, as you well know, there are many, many more students like her at Guilford High School at every level of academic achievement. We need to do better, and I know that we can. Thank you very much for your time.
I mean, I'm sure you're going to want to follow up on some of those issues. When would you want to do that under the high achieving students?
No, it's actually under preliminary enrollment report. I'd be happy to touch on those during that point.
Okay, all right.
Good evening, Craig Mullett. I'm a parent of 2 children in the Guildford school system. And firstly, I'd like to thank the Board of Education for including on the agenda under 8.6 tonight the GHS start times. As you know, this is an issue which I addressed the board on last year. And since that time, there's been a lot more very emphatic research that has shown that starting school later improves student performance. So much so that the Education Secretary, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics, have come out publicly in support of moving start times of high schools later. The most comprehensive research study ever done on the topic, which involved 9,000 students, was completed in February of this year, and it showed that there was a strong correlation between starting high school later and improved academic performance of students, both in state and national tests, as well as a reduction in car accident rates for teens on the road. In addition, the Education Commission of the states compiled a research policy paper with 3 key takeaways, and I'd like to highlight those to the board. The first was that the research shows that adolescents wake up and sleep differently due to their biological clocks, which I know we discussed last year, and they can lose as much as 3 hours sleep a night in school days due to these clocks. And there's virtually unanimous agreement in the research community that later start times would have a positive change in adolescent learning, health, and safety. And the third takeaway, which I think is really what I would ask the superintendent and the board to consider tonight, is that there are few, if any, educational interventions that are so strongly supported by the research evidence from so many different disciplines and experts in the field. And I would add my own priority to that can make such a difference for so little cost and effort, considering the impact they can have on our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm also a Craig here to talk about school start times. My name is Craig Canaperi. I'm a physician at Yale New Haven, and I'm the director of the Pediatric Sleep Program. I am also a Guildford resident as of 1 year ago, and the proud father of 2 little boys, ages 7, who's in 2nd grade at the Cox School, and age 4, and Teddy's at community nursery school. So I'm not just the president of the Hair Club for Men, I'm also a customer. The American Academy of Pediatrics does not lightly come out with statements, especially directly outside the medical domain. But when they issued the statement in support of later school start times for middle school and high school students, it really was a call to arms for educators, physicians, and parents to address this very important issue. As Craig alluded to before me, as school start times get earlier, as children progress through school, their physiology pushes them to go to sleep later and later. And the combination of those 2 factors results in significant sleep deprivation. And there is a long list of the effects of these, of short sleep on teenagers. There's physical health and safety, increased risk of obesity, increased rate of diabetes and high cholesterol, increased high blood pressure, higher rates of caffeine consumption, non-medical use of stimulant medications. In terms of mental health, there's increased risk of anxiety, depression, and poor impulse control, which is, at the beginning of the day, your teenagers are not known for their excellent impulse control. Decreased motivation and increased vulnerability to stress. And finally, in terms of academics, cognitive deficits with more complex tasks, impairments in executive function, self-control, lower school attendance, and increased dropout rates. Fortunately, there is a treatment for this, and that is moving school start times later. This is difficult to do because it is difficult to change the status quo. There are a couple of objections that are commonly raised. One is a perception that teenagers just need to go to bed earlier, and that they are actually just going to take advantage of later school start times and go to school later. The first school system nationally to move to later school start times was Minneapolis in 1995. And they found that teenagers actually went to bed earlier when school start times went later, resulting in a multiplier in the benefits to the teenagers. They didn't really analyze why that is. I suspect the students were more efficient at getting their homework done at night. And this has been reproduced in study after study. And the other real challenge is the practicalities of it. There is expense associated with increased busing. There are challenges in working around extracurriculars, specifically sports. And there is no doubt that sports are an important part of the education of our children. However, I will mention as a sidebar that it has been shown that more sleep is associated with improved athletic performance. So if you guys want to have an advantage over our hand in the next soccer game, you might want to think about letting our students get a little bit more rest at night. I think the most important part of this, though, is the effect on accidents of teenage drivers. The biggest risk to teenagers for injury and death are car accidents. I can't remember if Craig referenced this statistic, the town in Wyoming that moved their school start times from 7 a.m. to 8:30. Now that's a huge movement, granted. Reduced the rate of car accidents in their town for teenagers by 70%. I mean, what else could you do to make your kids 70% safer? I just want to close with a quote from Dr. Judy Owens, who did some of the research that's referenced in this report. If you knew that in your child's school there was a toxic substance that reduced the capacity to learn, increased chances of a car crash, and made it likely that 20 years from now he would be obese and suffer from hypertension, you would do everything possible to get rid of that substance and not worry about cost. Sleep deprivation is toxic for our kids, and we need to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other public comments for items on the agenda? Okay. Communications, anybody? I did get a couple, collectively got a couple of cards. We got a thank you card from Gabrielle Sejourné, our representative, and obviously a person who has had some guidance from the generation ahead of her that writing a handwritten note is sometimes a really nice thing to do. And that's a very nice gesture, and also a letter, a note from the Calvin Leap PTO thanking us for our support of the new playground. And so couldn't have done it without your thanks to them as well.
We also, Mr. Boss, we also received an email from a parent of one of the children who came to present to us at the board last year requesting the removal of styrofoam trays in the lunchroom. Thrilled to discover that, in fact, the school administration had listened to the kids and had made changes so that those styrofoam trays could be removed. And she was really, really thrilled, and her daughter was really thrilled that the administration had responded to their presentation.
Just to be fair and clear, they have not been removed to date, but we have informed the students at Lakes that we are removing them, and we will not purchase the styrofoam trays that we are currently using again. We will purchase alternatives that are better used and better reused or recycled. So the students at Lakes know that we're moving forward and are excited about our moving forward in that area.
And I think we are going, I've asked Freeman to try to put together a little more of a little more detailed agenda item on that at either the or the November meeting, and we'll try to get some of those kids back here and kind of get a little bit of an update as to what exactly is happening and what the alternatives were and why you went down the road that you went down.
You know, it's interesting. Students came to us 2 years ago asking for a change in venue for the junior prom, which our policy previously stated had to be held here at the high school. And they petitioned the board to change that policy. We did, and those students learned, I think, the most important civics lesson that a student can learn in terms of direct action. And now the younger group at Lakes have done the same thing, which has resulted in a change. And those kids are so proud of themselves. I know one of them personally, and they are thrilled.
Remember, students had no small part in changing the way we calculate GPA in the school system.
Right,
either.
that too.
Yep.
Okay, any other communications? All right, student reps, no report. Dr. Freeman, we're down to your report. You've already done 8.1, and I think there was a request to move up 8.6 to start times issues, so because there are a couple of people here who have other obligations. So can we move to 8.6 now?
I'd be happy to. And I will let the board know that I had little to share in that area. What I wanted to inform the board of was we did have a workshop meeting last year where we talked for a good chunk of the evening about start times. We also talked about the work that was on our plate and talked about tabling that issue. In that meeting, I think we all agreed that there's no question about the research. I don't think that anybody present is arguing or challenging the research. Considering that, the approach that I had planned on taking as we move into budget season this year is to sketch out at least one, if not two, options that would present different start times and do my best to capture what the impact of those changes would be. Bring that forward to the board early in the school year, early in the budget season, and begin a community conversation where we can sort of stipulate to all the research. I think we recognize the benefits and talk about how we might move through that process. In the conversation last year, I mentioned that at least from where I sit at the moment, there are a couple of ways that school districts tend to approach this. There are a couple options in front of you. One is to try to compress the bus runs as much as you can, maybe by increasing the number of buses, maybe by being as efficient as you can, not push the elementary school later into the day, but to compress all the bus runs, trying to give as much time in the morning and tighten everything up as much as you can. Another option is to push everything back, and that involves moving the high school to a reasonable hour and then shifting the middle and the elementary schools back off of that. Another option that is often discussed is why not just flip-flop high school and elementary school. The younger students often seem to be up naturally at those hours and spin those two. I think in Guilford we have an additional option which bears looking at, and it will certainly have some social impact, it'll certainly have some financial impact, but I think it could be minimized in that we have levels that break in different spaces than lots of school districts have. What I would like to do is at least draw out for the board what a K through 6 bus run would look like and what a 7 through 12 bus run would look like. It would in essence allow us to move the high school to the 8 o'clock start time that the middle schools have currently, and Baldwin would shift to the elementary runs with the elementary school. It would be, I think, the lowest financial impact. It might give us the greatest gain in morning start times without having to move the elementary end times. But what I would like to do is sketch that out and create a pros and cons, a benefit versus cost analysis of that, and use that to then spark a community conversation so that we get more people involved in the conversation, so that we weigh the value of the positives versus the impact and talk about how best to achieve this kind of move. I think that some of them merit a little greater detail than others. I wouldn't come forward saying there's only one option to look at, but I think by looking at one option in detail, it could begin a conversation that we could have as we move through the budget process. In a sense, modeling a little bit with what we did with full-day kindergarten last year. We sort of had a proposal from a year before. We carried that proposal over. We looked at costs, and I thought we had a rich conversation that followed us through the budget season as members of this board sort of evolved through that process, and I'd like to follow the same process with school start times and facilitate the conversation and see where we end. Ultimately, the proposal, I think, is going to hinge on a decision on whether to include it in our budget or not, because I'm not sure that I'll come forward with a cost-neutral one that wouldn't have other significant impacts, but we can talk about that as well.
I'm very sympathetic about budget, but I'm also, as a pediatrician, very concerned about children and how much. I ask myself the question after reading my professional organization's policy statement. The question is, how much is a child's life worth? We can reduce car accidents in teenagers by 70% or 50% or 20%. Is it not worth the extra money to do that? And all of us who live in Guilford are aware that every so often there's a horrible newspaper article about some teenager who was wiped out in a car accident. Secondly, how much is education worth? We're here as educators, and if we can show that student performance, student achievement, which is what this community is all about, can be improved by the simple act of changing start time. Even if it costs more money, why not? So I will join with my friends in the audience and my friends on the board that I think we need to act. We have now 9 months to come up with a plan for next year, and I think it's an idea whose time is right. And if it helps us beat Hand in football, great, but I wouldn't count on that.
Mr. Sands, hang on.
To be sure they don't also change.
Well, they probably will.
Well, quite honestly, I will be talking to colleagues around the state because all of the changes would be easier if a number of school districts were going in the same direction. And so I will be talking to colleagues and letting them know that we will be looking at this through our budget process this year.
Mr. Sands.
One of the, I also concur that this is an idea whose time has come. I mean, last year we had to deal with the issue of the kindergarten, and we finally resolved that satisfactorily. This year, I think this is one of the topics we really have to focus on. And I would be interested in an analysis of what other districts in Connecticut have done. In particular, I've been told that Wilton, which is a school district that is in some ways comparable to us, has switched over, and that they feel that that was a very positive thing for them. I'd be interested in having an analysis of who has implemented these changes and learning from those districts, you know, what they did and what the pluses and minuses were, and that sort of thing. Because I mean, we're not the only people who've thought about this, and we're not the only people who are thinking about it right now. There are several other districts who are having the same kind of discussion we are, and I agree that the right approach is to look at alternatives. And I also agree that it's unlikely that we're going to have a revenue neutral alternative. But I think, as my colleague has said, at some point, this isn't a question of money. This is a question of, can we improve what we're doing as an educational institution by making a structural change like this? And that may be worth more than adding 2 or 3 teachers or, you know, some other fancy technology in the classrooms. This might have more of an impact.
I think the workshop we had was actually before some of the new members joined the board.
That's right.
That's correct.
Yep.
And during that workshop, Jake Jarvis attended from athletics, and I think it's been brought up a couple times that one of the big issues is athletics and extracurriculars, or at least the perception that it would be very difficult to do that. I might ask that in parallel with discussions about busing and, you know, other things, that we try to have the people who would know best how it's going to impact other things, you know, prepare like a written report or PowerPoint or something that, you know, we could communicate to see what that impact would be on athletics and how we might work around it, or what's happened in Wilton. And I don't know if there are other big areas that are impacted, that there's somebody in the school administration or community that, you know, could look at those things. Because I've, you know, there's been some buzz in the community. I've had several people come up to me and talk about the AAP report, see that it's on the agenda. I haven't had a single person tell me that they're opposed to it. But I know it's out there. When we try to change it, there's going to be some people who are concerned. So I just think if we work in parallel to at least have accurate understanding of what it's going to impact, especially sports, I think it would be helpful to kind of do that at the same time.
I know that Mr. Jarvis and Mr. Macenti are going to be integral parts of this conversation all along the way.
Yeah, and I agree with all the comments, and seem to remember in that last presentation that there were some districts that had gone to a certain hour and then inched back over time so that they were then again starting earlier. And they just throw that out as a reminder that it is important to get the data of other districts and the other people involved and start the dialogue, as he said, so that we can make sure what we do, because I haven't yet heard, and I join in, I haven't heard any dissent, I join in, we should do it. But we should also do it right, so that we don't find ourselves in a position 5 years out of inching back from the time that we moved it later until.
And I applaud getting more communities involved, because that's really going to be the key in many ways for the athletic problem, for the a lot of other issues. If we get the more communities to join us, it would make the process a lot easier.
Has this been discussed at Learn or any of the other district-wide or
It has been discussed at Learn, and just like we did last year, it's like an issue everybody kind of wants to step away from, because there's so many, it's such a Pandora's box. It seems simple, but there are a lot of other things that play into it. Busing kids not only to athletic events, but to special ed buses. There's a lot of pieces to this problem.
Are there any contract issues with the unions?
There can be. You might be able to avoid them, again, if you kept the school days the same and just moved the bookends. Depending on how creative you get, you could open up contractual issues that would have to be worked through.
I don't
We should be able to
start time as a contractual issue. I think the total day is a contractual issue.
Right. So
well, that's what he said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. No, there's no issue. We could say today, contractually, that we were going to flip-flop the high school and the elementary schools, and as long as we kept the working hours, the total contact hours and the total working hours the same, there'd be no contractual difficulty
Having
there.
said that, you still want to have the teachers with a seat at the table talking about this, because there's obviously a huge impact on teachers.
Right.
You know, we also had, a little bit maybe surprisingly to me, but the last time we really talked about this in detail, maybe 10 years ago, or there are a lot of kids that work part-time after school, and we had a tremendous amount of resistance from parents whose kids work. Now, I don't know what the demographics are now, if that's any different, but it was something that we have to take into account. I mean, research, this is probably, you know, one thing about public education, if there's a study that says something, there's another study that says the opposite thing, almost always, right? There's not one in this area.
No.
I mean, there's no contrary research.
This is pretty clear.
This is pretty clear, and nobody disagrees with it, but it would, you know, out of all the things the state tells us we have to do, wouldn't it make sense for the state to say, okay, guess what?
I would love that.
Right. I mean, because this is a problem that really needs to be solved on a regional level, but, you know, maybe we have to be the first. I don't know.
Right. And
then they'll follow us. I don't know.
As the writer pointed out in his email to the board, why not lead instead of follow?
Because it would be better to be part of a group.
Part of a group.
But, you know, we'll
But we
see.
could lead the group.
effort.
Maybe.
And I think the reason for the approach that I want to suggest on this one is because in the abstract, it's too easy. And I think the only way that we will generate a true community conversation is to put a draft out. And when we have a draft out and you can see what the logistical implications will be, I think then we will get a community conversation started, and we will be able to really then put some meat to a conversation. So I will work with Mr. Bowden. We will put at least one draft together. We will have other more broadly sketched options. One draft is not going to be the final answer to anything, but I think it will allow us to start identifying, listing pros and cons, and having a real detailed conversation, because I think in the abstract it feels easy, and for some reason nobody goes after it. We need to get something out to make the conversation detailed, and we'll start that to move into a budget conversation.
I'm all for that. Unfortunately, we're discussing this early in September, and we have a lot of time. Fortunately, it's not June that we're bringing this up and trying to change it soon. So having drafts, having community conversations, listening to more people coming, as we have with Common Core last week, I think that's great. So thank you.
If I may I add one thing, which is that you mentioned work after school. Another thing I think we heard about were for working parents having older kids home sooner to receive and be kind of caretakers for younger kids is important. And I really think the idea of, I mean, you suggested leveling. I've been working on various little plans on pieces of paper throughout the week myself. I mean, the idea of somehow grouping together or just pushing the bottom up or something, I think we can think outside of the box and be creative about different scenarios that can address several of the concerns in a pretty straightforward manner. You know, and I just because I think it's so important, let me just, I'm at the Yale Child Study Center. Mental health issues with sleep deprivation are also a big issue. They were certainly mentioned by some of our speakers. And not to make it too personal, but I now have 2 high school teenagers in my home, and it is an early morning, and there is a lot of yawning. It is not, you know, a good extra 45 minutes, and I'm sorry I've mentioned this before, my senior this year was a junior last year with the first period study hall and got that extra hour. It was hugely different in his week. So I really think we need to do something about this.
It's a difference. It's definitely,
it's hugely different.
Kids in 3 different schools, and the middle school kids are getting up in the morning. My elementary school child is up doing his homework in the morning because he's up for 2 hours before he has to leave for school.
Good. Okay. Gentlemen, do you have any comments on any of this? Does this seem like a reasonable approach, at least at this point, of recognizing that we've got a little bit of work to do?
Absolutely. I mean, it's great to have a receptive audience, and I think we'd be happy to help in any way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll certainly let you know about further steps and look forward to your continued involvement. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, back to, we've done 8.1, we've done 8.6, so that means we go to 8.2 now, right? Opening of school and convocation.
Yep. Starting with convocation, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all the board members who were able to attend convocation. I know that the staff very much appreciated it. I want to thank Mr. Bloss for his comments. Mr. Bloss always speaks well, but I need to say that I got more complimentary comments for Bill's address and his message this year than in the past, and we got a lot of comments on the fact that everything fit together. You anticipated comments that were shared by Dr. Keene, by Mr. Bowden, by myself as the day unfolded, as the morning unfolded with our staff members. We gathered at Woodwinds. It is the last time that we will need to gather at Woodwinds to find a space large enough to bring all of our certified teaching and administrative staff together in a place where we aren't just required to stand and deliver to them. We can fit our staff in an auditorium or in theater seating in a gymnasium, but that's not how we want to do convocations. So as we kicked off this year, we had our staff members reading texts together, talking to each other, viewing alternate texts and discussing the connections between and among those topics, and thinking and discussing their learning cross schools, so that we had teachers from different environments working together. The message of the day all culminated with a recognition that in the last few years we have introduced a lot of new sheet music to this community. We've got new special education structures in the system and new supports in place. We've got new standards towards which we're working with new curricula to support those standards, with new instructional materials, both designed locally and purchased outside of the school district to support the work going in that area. We've got new teacher supervision and evaluation plans. We've got new administrative supervision and evaluation plans. We've got new assessments to measure our work, both moving towards those new standards and supporting the assessment and evaluation of what we do with teachers. All of that has been introduced new into the school district over these past few years. And as we work as a staff, I think we've been reflective of what our students do when we introduce new sheet music into a musical class. The first thing that we work towards is technical mastery. So we have been learning our notes. We've been learning the sheet music, and we have been playing from the sheet music. Part of Convocation this year was a recognition of the work, a recognition of how hard people have worked towards that technical mastery, and then an acknowledgement, a permission, and encouragement to remind people that when musical groups really take off is when they begin playing beyond the sheet music, when they start bending the notes, when they start improvising, when they start feeling the music more than reading the music on the page. And we have virtuosos in the school district, so we want to support the staff. We have promised them that we will continue to support their work, and we gave them permission this year to start rocking their shoulders and bending the notes and remembering that they are well into the work now, and the artistry is as important. In fact, it's more important than the technical mastery. And just to give credit where credit is due, Mrs. Dudley has been reminding us of this as we've worked with the teacher supervision and evaluation plan. Change doesn't happen overnight. Teachers don't change overnight. Teachers, to a large degree, can be creatures of habit. They need time. They need time with their peers, and they need continued support. Dr. Moore shared a commentary this summer, and in the commentary was a Japanese proverb that he who would make change must sit on a stone for 3 years. We haven't been sitting on any stones and waiting for change to happen, but we're well into the change, and it's time to remember the space for the artistry and the space for the joy and the space to improvise and bend the notes. And I need to tell you that the staff came away from Convocation, and I think we all heard comments as we then moved around the buildings that they appreciated hearing that message, and they appreciated hearing it starting from Bill as he welcomed staff back in the morning, and then going through all of the speakers that they heard that day. I need to tell you that the first week of classes, moving through the schools, people were commenting on it, and you could feel the recognition of that in the classroom. So Convocation was a great week. We moved from that, a great day. We moved from that directly into professional development. We spent a day and a half with trainers on the Bridges materials as teachers unpacked those materials and set up their classrooms and began moving the materials out to be used by students. We spent a day and a half with a math fellow from IFL working with our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math teachers, looking at instruction, beginning to build model units. Our English Language Arts fellow from IFL was here in the school system. Across buildings, we focused on communication and how to be better communicators as we do the work that we're doing. So the PD component was very exciting. And when the kids came back, we had a positive opening as well. Students came back excited. We watched parents driving to school to take pictures of the kids getting off of the buses. School buses ran reasonably well for the first 7 days of school. I do want to note that we have added a special education van as of Friday afternoon. We've been shaking out some bus run issues in the first week of school. The repaving taking place on 77 that started on the first day of school was not the best thing in the world that could have happened for us, but the buses have made it through the first few days, and we've shaken out the bus concerns, I believe, to a large degree. I do want to note, we talked about this in the operations committee, we do have significant construction taking place in or around 5 of our 7 schools. Starting here at the high school, where the construction itself is all outside of the school, but where fields and parking lots and access and egresses are changing, and then moving to Lakes and Leet and Baldwin, and most significantly Adams, where we are doing both security and, in Adams' case, security and an envelope project to improve the efficiency of that building. Schools have been disrupted by the construction, but administrators and staff members, and I need to say students and parents, have been positive. They're coming in, they're seeing that the work is moving forward. All of our communications are up and running, all of our offices are working, all of our security measures around student and parent access are up and functional, but we're not done yet. All the new furniture hasn't been delivered, all of the glass hasn't been delivered. We've got both local maintenance and custodial crews as well as the construction crews that continue to work evenings and weekends to get the work completed, and I just appreciate the flexibility and the good humor that I have seen from all of the groups that have been involved. quite honestly, bottom line is it's been a really good opening to school. There's a lot of positive energy, there's a lot of good work being done, and a lot of support from the community around the work that we're doing, both physically and instructionally in our schools. And we're happy to answer any questions about the opening week. I think I hit on PD, convocation, buses, and security.
Questions? I thought there was a good question at the operations meeting about, specifically at Adams, that now Adams is going through the plywood window routine that Mr. Augustine went through at Cox last year. And the reason, there actually was a rational reason why the frames were taken out without the glass being there and reinstalled, or new frames installed without the glass being ready to be put back in. And I wonder if you could probably just share that.
Yeah, the question was asked, why couldn't we have just left the old glass in until the new glass got here and trade old for new and avoid the plywood stage that we're experiencing in the middle? It was a good question, and the answer is that there was asbestos abatement that needed to be done around those areas. So by removing the old glass, doing all of the asbestos abatement over the summer, having the hygienist and the air sampling company come in and clear us and certify us as clean, now allows us, when the new glass arrives, to simply take out the plywood, remove the old frames, put the new frames in. None of that area needs to be tented or abated or removed from student access. It's work that we can do now more easily and efficiently during an evening or a weekend shift or a vacation. So we will be experiencing some plywood at Adams. Most of it is around the interior courtyard glass, but we will have some plywood until we can finish that job. What we don't have around any of that plywood right now is asbestos. That's all been abated.
All right.
Good.
Thank you for the reminder.
Other questions or comments? Okay, terrific. That, by the way, the Route 77 project is a state project, not a town project. So we
I wasn't laying blame. I was just noting the.
It was very bad timing.
The timing was terrible.
Yes, it was.
The synergy.
Okay, 8.3 is a preliminary enrollment report.
Yeah, I do want to remind the board that we'll have an official enrollment report for you in your October meeting. But generally at this meeting, what I bring to you is some general overview of where the numbers are shaking out. In your packet this evening, we gave you two pieces of paper that you could use to take a quick look. One of them looks at the elementary loading level. I did want to note for the board that at the elementary level, K through 5, our highest class size is 22 at this point. We have done a very good job keeping class sizes at the elementary level in the high teens or the low 20s. And I wanted to point out the largest delta. The largest delta appears at the kindergarten level. Kindergarten is always a moving target. We don't have a group of students that are moving from 1 year up. It's always hard to anticipate kindergarten numbers. When we went through the full-day kindergarten conversation, we talked about being able to accept numbers as high as 20 into our kindergartens. And we, at this time, have 4 classes, 4 kindergarten sections that sit at 19s and 20s. And that creates the largest delta, where one school loaded to kindergarten classes of approximately 12 per class, and 2 schools loaded to kindergarten classes that sit at 18s, 19s, and 20s per section. And then one fell very neatly around the 15 and 16 level. Again, if we ran a kindergarten campus, if one of our 4 schools was built to be primary grades, just K1 and 2, we'd be able to level all those K classes really equally. At this point, we're continuing to keep an eye on it. We'll continue to monitor. 20 is high for a kindergarten classroom, but it is manageable at this point. And so we'll continue to keep an eye on those levels for you. The other piece that I pulled together, and Mrs. Breeze commented on it earlier today, there has been some conversation. I know that the board received some communication around AP classes, so I wanted to take a look at AP sections as well. What we have done is we've given you a handout that shows AP sections. I do want to note that at the high school, AP average class size is about 18.3. And yes, average is deceptive. We have one class at our high school that sits at 27. That's an AP class as of today. We have one that sits at 11. So when you average those out, you're looking at class sizes of approximately 18, I believe it's 18.3. And that affects approximately 514 students. We have different levels at the high school. We have AP, honors, level 1, level 2 classes. We have some classes that are then identified as maybe special ed or special programming class sizes. Our level 1 classes right now sit at a class average of, I think it's 19.8, and that affects approximately 3,065 students. We also wanted to look at other schools that we tend to benchmark ourselves against. So on your handout, I gave you some information around Branford, Madison, Glastonbury, Wilton, Weston, Westport, I believe. We simply reached out informally to these schools. We wanted to know how many sections of AP were they offering. What you tend to see is that when you've got a school that sits around 1,000 students, the 16 AP sections that we offer is competitive. It is in some cases at the higher end. You might notice that if there are schools that jump up to approximately 2,000 students, you see the AP offerings increase to as much as 20 or 22. And that goes right to a point that Mrs. Breeze made about flexibility. When you've got a larger student population, if you're offering 20 AP courses, it is easier for students to find multiple AP courses because there's more offerings. The difficulty that we run into is then class size. If we offered 22 AP offerings, our class average would not be sitting at 18.3. If we offered 22 AP offerings, our class average would run down to the low teens for those classes, and that's always a balance that we're struggling with. And it is a balance that we struggle with from K all the way through 12th grade in our AP classes. Are 20 students in a kindergarten class too many, or should we be looking at adding a kindergarten section? Are 27 students at the high school in an AP class too many, or should we be looking at adding another section? These are annually the issues that we struggle with when we look at our enrollment distribution. And there are moves that continue to happen. I've come before this board in September and said we need to add a classroom section and we need to add a teaching position early in the year. You heard that last year Mr. Macenti found ways within the school to reschedule and move a section. It's always about trying to find that balance, and we use averages to help us look at that. The other thing I noted on the sheet for you was other schools that did see AP classes that ran as high as the 27. We're not the only school that has an AP class of 27. I'm not particularly happy about that. I provide this as context for the board, and when I come back in October, I will have a more full and a more complete enrollment report that I can give. There are going to be changes. There are things that move in the first few weeks of school. I'll remind the board, I think we've only finished 7 days. We've got 7 days behind us at this point. I know that Mr. Macenti and his admin team and the guidance staff at the high school are still making schedule changes. They're still working through making adjustments and changes to student schedules.
Can you comment on the scheduling conflicts that we're hearing about? Is it, students that are sitting in study halls waiting to get placed in classes? Is that all levels of kids, or is it kids that are trying to get into AP courses, or?
Yeah, I can't answer that specifically. I know that every year you start and there are students who have fallen into study halls, and so the counselors are working with those students to find out, can we find a class that will pull you out of the study hall and get you in, particularly if the students are in study halls and don't have a full course load. So it's not unusual in the beginning of a school year for the study halls to be slightly larger, and then the counselors are working with those schedules. We go through sort of 2 iterations. The first is the computer run, and the computer does try to place each class so as to optimize student enrollment. So let's say that we're looking at an AP class, let's say that we're looking at an AP Latin class. The computer is going to look at all the students that requested that. The computer is going to look at all the other classes that those students have tried to sign up for, and the computer is going to say, if we place the AP Latin class this period, the fewest conflicts will happen with that class. Once that happens, the guidance counselors then sit down and try to figure out if they can outsmart the computer, and can they find a way to move students in. But ultimately, we've got an 8-period day. We offer 16 AP courses in our school. 7 years ago, we offered 11 AP courses. We're now up to 16 AP offerings. We've got an 8-period day, and I think all of our AP offerings are singletons. We don't necessarily have multiple sections. So for a student who may have gotten teacher recommendations to be an AP in all levels, it becomes almost impossible to be able to have all 6 of your classes be at AP level without there being some conflict, because students will inherently have conflicts that can't be resolved. I'm taking Spanish, you're taking French, we both want to be in AP something else, AP math offering, and there's inherently going to be contradictions. As we grow and as we go through growing pains, that changes. When our enrollment's going up, we can add more sections, and that tends to open up and become easier. And when enrollment begins constricting, it's that flexibility that you really run into, and you run into trying to run the most efficient schedule you can by keeping class sizes at a certain size, or running the most flexible schedule that you can that ends up being staff intense with really low class numbers. And then as a Board of Ed and as a central office administration, we are looking K through 12. If we were NFA and just running a high school, we'd be looking at that differently. I did say publicly to this board as we went through budget deliberations the last 2 years that we were making some minor reductions at the high school. We did it last year, about 1.2 FTEs, and the year before I believe we did 0.8 FTEs. And I said publicly that we have a priority on keeping our primary class sizes as low as we can, that our K1 and 2 students should be in classes of teens. And at the high school, if we work really creatively with efficient scheduling, we should be able to do with fewer FTEs at the high school without impacting offerings. We haven't impacted offerings. We're offering more AP classes than we've had before. We're seating more students in APs than we did 5 years ago, and our AP scores are higher than they were 5 years ago, even though we're bringing more students in. But I have to agree with Mrs. Breeze. The flexibility gets constricted when you do that. It's just a lot easier to have more offerings if we were comfortable with class sizes of 10.
The one that just really seems to jump out is AP English. And I guess last year it sounds like there might have been a precedent for adding a section, early in the year. I mean, AP English, of all the AP courses, I mean, if I were to make my list of the ones that I would think people would prioritize, it would be that one. And along with AP Math and maybe some science. But just having 2 sections there would allow a lot more flexibility. And it just does seem like 27 is a lot for an English class where there's, ideally a lot of interaction and things like that. So I would hope that the administration could at least look at that over the next couple of weeks and see. I don't know if we have the teaching capacity to do that or shift anything around. It just seems like AP English, that's a lot to be in a class like that, and to give a second section with, I don't know how much you can shift around at this point, but.
What is the next largest class after the English?
I would have to check with Mr. Macenti or his team. I don't know if they know off the top of their head. The next largest class size in AP after the AP English that sits at 27. 24 or 22.
Can I just ask a question? 16 AP classes. I know there are a variety of kind of advanced options, and another are kind of UConn ECE classes. Those aren't considered AP in this number, or are they?
No, those are strictly AP.
So those are additional kind of advanced offerings. Okay.
Yes, and to some degree, they are things that we need to communicate better around going forward. I believe that was part of the comments that we heard earlier, that if we know that students are not going to be able to have all of the AP offerings that they'd like to have, we need to do a better job pushing the scheduling calendar so that we can vet those concerns and have those conversations earlier, sooner rather than later, so that if a student can't get the AP offerings, they have a reasonable amount of time to explore the early college credit or other options that are available.
Another, on enrollment, this may be limited by geography some, but when you look at the 3 sections at LEAT of kindergarten, where you've got 35 kids in 3 classes, so you got 11, 12, 12, and then you look at Cox, and there's 59 in 3, which is 2019. I mean, it just seems like if you could move one of those teachers from LEAT to Cox, you would have 14 to 15, and then 17, 18. Which just seems like it'd be more equitable. Is that?
Yeah, but I'm not sure we have a classroom.
Right, that's why I'm asking. I mean, is that the issue? Is it classroom geography? Like we only have 3 classrooms at Cox, for example?
Yes, it could be the class area. It's that at this point in the year, the students have met their teachers. And then if you look at Cox, and I don't want to put ideas in Mr. Augustine's head that he may not have looked at already, but you can see that as the fourth grade moves out, you've got a fourth grade with 4 sections, followed by a third grade that is only 3. So you could see how next year Mr. Augustine will have a staff member that becomes available who could either then bring those numbers down as first grade sections when those students move into first grade, or look at offering that 4th section in kindergarten should the kindergarten enrollments remain this high, and work within the classrooms that are available at Cox right now.
I guess what we're seeing, I mean, this could be just 1 year, but the enrollment is pretty steady from 1 to K compared to last year. And I guess I would think about the teachers not being at a particular school, but within a district. That if you have, 200 moving through, that if there's one school that has one that's way off, you could shift the teachers from a school to a different school.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've done
Teachers
that.
are employees of the district. Right.
I know.
Yep.
Right. But
It's
that's what I'm
also
saying.
the students, the kids. I mean, it's community school. That's where they want to, their parents want them to be.
No, I understand the issues. I'm just saying, I would think about it when you're saying like there's 3 sections coming out, there's 4 teachers, that maybe there's another school that
Oh, absolutely, right. That's one way to look at it within the building, but you're absolutely right. If enrollment is dropping at one school and increasing at another, that teaching resource is going to move from one school to that other school without question. Absolutely.
We talk about this every year. I mean, when we have 4 small elementary schools, it is inevitable that there's going to be some imbalance. You're either going to be at the high end of the average or the low end of the average, almost by definition. And
quite honestly, while that is significant in the kindergarten level, when you look across the 5 grades in the 4 schools, it's actually more balanced this year than we have seen in past years.
It looks very good
true.
overall. That's the one that stands out. That's the one I bring up every year.
It jumps out. And we were sort of nervous about full-day kindergarten to see if it was going to change the draw this year. Next year we will have 1 year of experience, and remember we have commissioned another enrollment
demographic study right,
that is being worked on as we speak. So we will have another demographic study before the close of this year, hopefully to help us make better predictions moving forward.
the 4th grade class is the biggest of the 5 classes, so you would think that you might have some flexibility moving forward to try to balance that out a little bit.
Unless to Dr. Moore's point, Baldwin needs the support by having those teachers, so you have to, so we're constantly looking at what this means.
That's true. That's a big class.
So we will be working with Mr. Hamill, we'll be working with the 4 elementary principals, and they will all be looking at this, I got to tell you, in the next few weeks as they start working on their first budget projections for next year.
We ended up with 196 in kindergarten this year. What did we have in kindergarten last year?
193.
The quickest way is to look at the kindergarten number, the first grade number.
That's not the same.
It's 193 last year. At this time, there were 193 in kindergarten. The other thing that we reported last year were the Baldwin, Adams, and GHS numbers. Will we be getting those? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I just didn't pull those for you today. Again, this is an informal report tonight. We hold the official presentation, and in fact, Chris, I'll be using your grid again, because the grid that you put together works really well to share that. So we will be doing a formal presentation on enrollment on October 1st. The numbers continue to move through September.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at, the like K in 1 year to grade 1 in the other year. It's pretty constant. It tends to go up a little bit, I think, because of Montessori schools probably. Right. So it went up 8 from last year, from 193 to 201. The other thing that is related to this that I think was brought up in a communication that I saw somewhere was about attrition and withdrawals, and if we have the capacity to look when kids are being pulled out of a grade. I don't know if you're going to talk about that at another point, but
yeah, a number of board members have asked me if we conduct exit interviews with students who withdraw from the school system, and particularly students who withdraw from the school system, and do we have a way to note if they leave not for relocation but to attend private school. So we do have a way to do that, and we're combing that data now, and we're going to put together a list of students who have withdrawn for private school, and I'm going to invite those families in to talk with me about that decision. It is something that I have thought about in the past but never tackled in the past, and it seems some interest in it this year, so I'm happy to do that and explore what's happening there this year.
The total in elementary school, 1227 students, is that roughly the same as last year, or is that a decrease?
I'd have to go back and look. I believe it's roughly the same. Our enrollment was only changing slightly, and the reduction was primarily at the high school level this year, but I'd want to go back and check before
We'll get that in the October numbers.
I have the numbers from last year. I mean, it's fairly stable. The fourth grade this year is the one moving up from 293 last year. So fourth grade last year was 262 at this time. So they've moved up to Baldwin, so it's a smaller class.
Right.
And then it's pretty stable going down.
The high school is the place where we see, I think over the last 5 years, the high school's down about 65 students. It's not it's not tremendous.
No.
Other districts, other neighboring districts have seen drops of 200.
Like the one to the east.
And we have not. So that's the only place where you're seeing minor.
Although it is, I mean, it's a big drop off from, I mean, grade 8 last year was 309. Right. We're at one.
That's been a really large
Yeah, we've got bubbles. We've still got some bubbles.
Still, the bubble of 100 is
Yeah.
But you're always, you know,
Yeah.
it's always going to be
We
like
have
that, you
that's
know.
a huge
I mean, how do you explain, you know, grade 2 at Jones is 80, grade 1 is 47? Well, it's the same district. It's 1 year apart. How do you know? I mean, that's when you have small districts. That's going to happen.
But we've gone from classes close to 300 to classes close to 200.
Well, at least in the kindergarten class, but, you know, the next, in the elementary schools, you've got, you know, 201, 249, 254, 291. So, you know, but that's why we're doing the demographic study. We've committed to doing that, and we, you know, if our enrollment is actually going to decline by 10%, let's say, there are going to be some impacts to that. That's going to give us, I mean, there's going to be good news and bad news. It's going to give us some flexibility to do some things and going to give us the opportunity to save some money.
But can continue to constrict flexibility when you look at the scheduling of smaller schools, right?
Okay.
There's
That's
going
also
to, yes, that's a mixed bag.
Paul, looking at the numbers of total student enrollment in our neighboring schools, I think there might have been a transposition error. We have Guilford, total students at Guilford High, 1,080. And Madison at 1238. I think that's backwards.
I think we got to look at all the. I don't think Glastonbury's 2,200 either. I think Glastonbury's.
I can check that data.
Glastonbury's.
Again, we did this. I'll be happy to bring this back.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
you.
I mean,
Yep.
can I say about the AP class issue? I think that I expect that this is going to be part of the study that Dr. Borland's study, and what are our practices with AP? What are we? Should we have more offerings? Are there people that would qualify, that aren't getting into AP classes that they should be getting into? I think that's part, as far as I'm concerned, that should be part of the study and part of the report. And if there's a better way to do it, then we should be open to doing it that way.
I absolutely agree. We will ask Dr. Borland to look at this. I'll also just note, remember that we've been recognized on the AP Honor Roll for the last 2 years. As AP looks at our practices at Guilford High School, they have recognized us as making their honor roll when they look at how we are scheduling our classes, how we're enrolling students, and how well our students are doing. We've increased offerings, we've increased students participating, and we've increased our performance. Generally, when you increase the N, the performance tends to go down. We've had the opposite. We've increased the number of students participating, and we've improved the scores on our tests. So, yes, absolutely, for what it's worth, I just wanted to note that AP has looked at our practice and been confident with it.
Well, see what Dr. Borland says.
Absolutely.
The numbers went from 1261 in the K-4 last year to 1227.
Oh, last 5 years is what I'm talking about. Right. They haven't gone up year.
Somebody had asked that question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Added that.
I did want to also give you a very quick update on hiring and vacancies. At this point, we had 3 administrative and director level positions that were open. At our last meeting, I reported 1 remained vacant. I'm happy to report that a new dining services director will take her position here on Monday. She'll be joining us this Monday. She comes to us from Milford. We had 20 paraprofessional positions that we have hired through the summer. We still have 6 paraprofessional positions that we're in the process of filling. We have currently hired 25 certified positions and we have 3 openings that remain in certified positions as we open school. I noted for you previously, one of those was the math coach at Adams that we have talked about, and we continue to recruit actively. At this point, we are recruiting at a national level, and I will tell you candidly that at this point, we saw some of the trainers that we brought in for PD and made them offers because they were great, and we've tried to hire them away to us. But at this point, the math coach remains a significant vacancy, and then we actually have a full-time position and a .5 position in special ed that were both generated very recently. We have long-term subs in those positions, and we are working to fill both of those positions as well. So 3 vacancies within the teaching ranks as we open school, 2 of them working directly with students. 1 is professional PD level support.
Okay.
I'm going to keep moving on if I have a gap there.
Go ahead.
Also in your packet, we have for you tonight the results, the data that was generated by the survey that we conducted late into the summer. We talked about 2 surveys. There is the climate survey that we conducted at the end of the school year with staff members, parents, and students. Those results are not here from you. That's a more complicated study. It had a greater response rate. We haven't broken those out for you yet. However, what we did put together for you was a quick overview of the survey that we put together following the public hearing here to talk about our experience, our community's experience after the first year of full implementation of the Common Core state standards. I had talked about some concerns I had with conducting a study on such a complicated topic. I had told you that I was getting proposals from a professional organization that does survey work at this level, and we chose not to do that. We chose to do a simple survey in-house. We sent out approximately 2,800 unique invitations to participate in the survey. What we did was we targeted families who had students who would be entering into the 2nd grade. We wanted people to be able to have 1 full year of experience to compare. So we didn't invite parents whose students had just finished kindergarten. That was only a half-year experience. They wouldn't have the context to be able to look at how last year was different from a year prior. So we identified and we sent 1 invitation to each family for each child that they had. So if you had a student who was in 3rd grade and 6th grade, you would have gotten 2 invitations to participate. If you had a child who was in kindergarten and 2nd grade last year, you would have only gotten 1 invitation to participate. We had approximately a 9% response rate. We had 256 responses to the survey. What you see on page 2 is an actual graphical representation of the responses to the questions that we scored based on numbers. So for instance, question number 3, how did your child feel about going to school each day? 35.9% of the respondents said that their child felt positive about going to school each day. 33.9% of the respondents said that their child felt somewhat positive about going to school each day. That is 35 or 36% and 34% of the 256 respondents. And we've given you that breakdown on the questions that we put in. The questions weren't specifically about Common Core state standards. They were about the areas that people commented on. So we heard people concerned that school was less engaging and less fun for their students. We asked, how does your child feel about going to school? We heard about rigor, and was the rigor too great? Was it too little? Was it changing? So we asked about rigor in mathematics and in English language arts, as well as in other areas. We heard about homework. We heard about teacher latitude and creativity, so we asked about assignments that teachers were generating. And then at the end, we had simply an open-ended box where people could comment on their experiences. I believe of the 256 responses, 136 people chose to take advantage of the open-ended box, and we gave you a sampling. We took out 10 of the responses that we received in that area. Right now, we are working on coding the responses for common themes. The SurveyMonkey tool allows us to identify keywords, and it will chunk these out, and we can break out all 136 comments into themes. I would say that after reading them, if there were themes that were identified, they were similar to the themes that we heard that came up more than once when we had our public hearing. There were comments about teacher professional latitude. Do teachers have the ability to make decisions within their curriculum as we have shifted to Common Core state standards? There were comments about students feeling less engaged when they come to school. There were comments that this country needs higher standards and Guilford can always improve and keep up the good work. There were comments about supporting our teachers. The teachers are being asked to take on a lot, and they will need time and professional development and resources if they're going to be expected to do this well. Again, I think they were the same themes that we heard from the community when community members chose to speak. As we put the survey together, I did talk to a number of people about what kind of response rate should we be looking for before we began generalizing the information that we got. I also asked a lot of questions about voluntary opt-in surveys and generalizing from voluntary opt-in surveys versus controlled random sample surveys. I do need to say that in any case, whatever you read from these results, we should be cautious generalizing from these results. 9% return would be considered a low return rate.
That's important.
Well, I think that the summertime is a difficult time to reach parents. I think there's lots of reasons. I think we had just conducted a survey at the close of school, and now we were asking some questions that were similar. So I want to be careful, but I do want to note that both a voluntary opt-in survey and then with this response rate, I think anytime our community talks to us, we should listen. I just think we need to be careful about generalizing from this survey. I think we should look at each response as an individual and therefore valid response, but be careful about making broad assumptions based on anything that we read.
What kind of a response rate do we get at the end of the school year?
That one, I believe, was more about a 19% response rate compared to a 9%. Yeah, it was close, yes.
Given, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, a 9% response rate, we have to be careful, but I think we can still learn things. I assume SurveyMonkey can do this. I would think it would be especially important, and it will make smaller percentages, but especially important to break these down at least by elementary, middle school, and high school, because the sense that I have gotten from speaking to parents in general is that there's more concern at the lower levels than at the middle and high school levels, and I just, if we break that down and all these questions look generally the same, then we're doing fine. I suspect that that's not going to be the case, and I think we're missing some important information when we aggregate 12 grades into one chart.
I think we can look at that. We did this for the purpose tonight because it's the first time we're bringing it to you. We wanted to give you the first high-level look, but yes, I believe we can break it down to that level. I'm going to say I believe. I will talk to Ms. Hahn tomorrow, and we'll see if we can break it out to that level.
Comments, questions?
Well, I'm glad that we got this out. Personally, I think the general categories of the questions were good. I think I heard from a fair number of community members that they just appreciated the chance to provide some open-ended feedback, and I think that's important. I would actually, encourage us to think about doing this on a yearly basis so that people expect it. They know they have a forum to comment on the year and how it went. We can monitor things a bit over time. How we do that with the climate survey, which is state mandated, and something like this, whether we combine it or do two separate ones. The one thing I really would like to see, and I've asked for this before on the other surveys, is just to have it come to the board, how it's worded, and allow us to have some feedback before it goes out. Some of us had helped with some of the wording which was used, and there was some back and forth about how exactly to word it, but I did get one comment from, I think that we all received, that they felt the questions were somewhat biased, and I think sometimes it's easy to phrase a question about, is your kid engaged, and have somebody, it's hard to disagree with that, but there's ways to phrase things that may be a bit more neutral. The problem is once you do a survey to compare it the next year, you want to get a consistent way to do it. So,
right.
But I just think it's, as some of the speakers who came up said, it's a customer service. The response rate is probably never going to be fantastic. But I do think we can learn things. I would personally just like to see all the comments. I can read through them. I mean, you can categorize them, but I just in electronic format or whatever, just to see what people are saying. And I agree a lot with what Katie was saying about we have the numbers to break it down. I think that's good. But I appreciate the district taking the time to send this out.
I would tell you I got similar comments. I got comments both after the public hearing that the board hosted here and after the survey that people appreciated, and I think it sets us up well for the continued conversations as we move forward. Remember that we've got small group conversations that we're scheduling through the months of October, November, and December, where we're going to go to each of the elementaries, one middle school meeting and one high school meeting, where we're going to continue to have the conversation. And I think we'll be able to use the comments that were shared here as well as what we've seen in the survey to help sort of shape those conversations and at least create probes and questions around those conversations. And so we're going to continue. I got the same comments, Chris. You're right. We do have now requirements to do both a climate survey annually. We have a requirement to do a survey that's associated to teacher and principal evaluation annually. And if we want to look at doing this, I think we need
the evaluation survey. Is that survey of who?
The new teacher and administrator evaluation systems require that you have at least some survey component that feeds into that.
Survey of the parents?
Yes, so your comment is right on when you say that we've got to have some consistency. But 2 years ago, we rolled out the climate survey when it was just a mandate that we have a survey about climate and culture in the schools, and it was really targeted towards bullying. A year later, we had new teacher evaluation mandates, and that said that we needed to have surveys related to teacher evaluation. So we looked at compiling those two and doing one survey that asked both of the questions that we could vet out. And then this year, we added a local desire to have one that's sort of focused on the impact of Common Core state standards to what's happening. So we've got three. We've got one that's associated with bullying legislation, one that's associated with evaluation legislation, and one that we've got a local desire to keep doing. We've got to think about how we can fit those together so that we can finally have it be consistent and start generating some longitudinal data.
The other thing, and this may have been anecdotal, but I didn't get a survey, my wife didn't get a survey, several people I talked to didn't get a survey initially, and it may have just been emails, but also if you have two parents that have an email and you're only sending for one kid, how do you decide?
We used the information that was given to us in Power School, so what we did is we took the first email address that was listed by the family on their Power School component. We went back and forth about, do you send it to all the emails that are listed, but one family lists, the home family account, other people list multiple accounts. We did run into problems where we found that we had sent out invitations to an email address that was 2 years old. Anytime somebody contacted us, we were able to figure out what was going on and correct that. But I've got to tell you that I know not everybody knew they didn't get an invitation.
The downside is getting more than one response on a kid, but maybe two parents have different perspectives that are valuable even if you're duplicating. I would be more in favor of just sending to the whole list and see what you get back.
There's also an opportunity to do a simple open uninvite. You could just post the survey and people click on the link on the website. And we went round and round about what's the right way to do that, and there's no clear research that we found. Admittedly, sort of, we're amateurs. The feedback that we got was it doesn't have to be real sophisticated. We just want to be asked how we feel. But we had to make some decisions about how to make that ask. I am more than happy to take feedback and do this differently moving forward. The more, well, I don't know. There's a lot of research on there, and there's a lot of, I think, contradictory opinions about what's the best way to do this sort of thing.
Okay.
It was an interesting exercise, and I think both Chris and Katie said it. Anytime people find a way to comment, there's value in those comments. So we're looking at everything that we're getting and trying to figure out what that tells us to do.
Well, the two answers I think are entirely consistent is how informed you feel about Common Core state standards and their implementation, and how interested are you in learning more. And clearly there's interest in learning more, but you're telling us that you're going to be doing these small meetings around the district, and hopefully those are going to be well attended and well publicized.
We met this morning and started talking about our next GCTV production that will be on this topic. We've got small group meetings scheduled. Part of what we have.
When are those scheduled? Or?
We can have those dates out to you later this week. I think we gave you at your last meeting, I think we gave you some of the projected dates. Not all are set. I believe we have dates for the 4 elementary meetings now. I know we do not have confirmed dates for middle or high school, but those are pushed into, I think it is the December time frame. I believe we've got 4 dates that are confirmed into October and November at the 4 elementaries. I will resend those to board members. And they may not have been completed. When we handed out the overview last time, there may still have been some TBDs on those, but I'll make sure you get those.
Okay.
And again, for the community, just because we're hosting small conversations in different neighborhoods doesn't mean that a LEAT parent can only attend a LEAT meeting. We're doing it so that we have smaller venues and more people have an opportunity to express opinions and ask questions. And so you're invited to attend any or any number of the meetings that you'd like to attend. It's not strictly for a neighborhood school. We just want to go to neighborhood settings and try to have small groups. We talked about start times.
Yep.
The last is just a quick note. When last I reported on the high achieving student study with Dr. Borland, we noted that we are building a schedule for Dr. Borland on October 2nd and 3rd, and we noted that on October 2nd, Dr. Borland would be hosting a focus group for parents, and we are aware that October 2nd conflicts with a high school evening event. I've talked with Dr. Borland. He will be coming back for at least 2 more dates. Those dates haven't been set yet, but when Dr. Borland comes back for his next 2 dates, he has agreed to host a second evening for parents, and we will do everything we can to make sure that it does not conflict with high school events. Now again, parents will be able to attend either or both of those focus group meetings, but we'll make sure to schedule around the high school for the second event.
Thank you.
So that
That's great.
the high school parents can be at both of those.
Now, how about, I mean, will we get a schedule of the other ways that he's approaching, like who's he meeting with? And, you know, I don't know if there's opportunity or if we could create opportunity for board members to meet with him as well, whether in small groups or, I don't know if it's supposed to be meeting as a whole board, but.
That was the other request, was that we have an event for board members. So as he comes back on the 2nd and 3rd, he'll be meeting with teachers from all 3 of the different levels. He'll be meeting with special education administrators from all 3 levels, principals from all 3 levels. He's meeting with some central office staff, the parents. So the next go-around, he's going to tell us who he feels he still wants to see, and there was a request at the last meeting, make sure there's a board opportunity for board members to speak with him as well. So we'll have the high school parent evening, and then we'll make sure that we have a board activity as well. Terrific.
Okay.
I think that concludes my report.
Anything else? All right.
Just
Good.
one
Yeah.
question. I sort of feel unfinished that last few meetings we talked about the tentative schedule for kindergarten of what the class day would look like. And I sort of would like to know, now that school has started, what the day is going to look like, does look like. So how much of the day is free time? How much is free play? How much is academics?
We have that. We can get that out to you. I'm sorry that we didn't share that.
Yeah, maybe you can have, maybe one of the principals, not tonight, but maybe at the October meeting, you can have one of the principals maybe come and tell us, or a teacher, just come and tell us about what it looks like. I'll tell you, I was talking to...
I sent you a picture.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I was actually talking to some of the new teachers out tonight about how, and some of the kindergarten teachers about how it was going, and I talked to Mrs. McCarthy also, and they said it was going fabulously, but I didn't ask them exactly what the schedule was. So maybe somebody can report on that on the October meeting.
I'd be happy to. I was in a number of kindergarten classes at the end of the day on Friday. Now, note, Friday was we haven't had a full 5-day week yet, but Friday was a 4-day week, and I was in kindergarten classes on the end of Friday and checking to see how tired the kids were, and they were bouncing from activity
That's
to
what one of the teachers said.
The teachers, however, were exhausted. Yeah. The teachers were...
They get what they asked for, full day.
All right, good. So 9.1 is board agenda, personnel items. There are 4 resignations to ratify. Robert Rafka at the high school, science teacher, Kristen LeMay, Jones special ed, Karen Clark, Baldwin music teacher, and Elise Sue, special ed at the high school. Is there a motion to ratify those resignations?
So moved. Second.
Any comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And then there are 5 appointments, and they were all here tonight, so hopefully we'll ratify these. Leon Susi, grade 2 elite, Michael Barron, science teacher at the high school, Kristen Coles, special ed at Jones, Cassandra Lulai, Baldwin psychologist, and Joyce Galehouse, art teacher at Cox and Lakes. Is there a motion to ratify their appointments?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Happy to be almost done with hiring, I suspect. 9.2 is to receive for possible action district priorities for 2014-15, which is an exhibit somewhere.
Yeah, we've given it to you in 2 different versions. In your electronic packet last week, you received one that has tracked changes so that you can see the history of the changes. In your folder tonight, we gave you one that would just show a finished product because sometimes it's easier to look at what it looks like now. I will say again that our suggestion to you as we look at district priorities for this year, we've taken the liberty of drafting some suggested language for you. And again, our strong suggestion would be, as we've done in the past, our priorities don't change wholesale year to year. Our priorities tend to remain consistent, and that allows us to continue to do consistent and good work. The way the priorities were written last year is there was essentially one that spoke to the student learning experience in the classroom. There was one that spoke to the way that we support teachers as they provide that student experience in the classroom. And then there was one that spoke to both a physically and emotionally safe environment. And that if these are our priorities, if this is our focus each year, everything that we do should fit into one of those big buckets. Instruction invites effort, and effort grows ability. If we truly believe that, we create a safe environment, and then it's all about priority 1 and 2. Help teachers to generate instruction that invites effort and feed the students as they make that effort. What we did last year for the first time is underneath those priorities, we added a bullet list to show the work or to show the specific initiatives which we would be focusing on this year. So specifically this year, we've brought some language changes forward to you. It's not just that all students will experience academic rigor. As we've looked at our own language, we want to remember that there is a priority on students engaging in that work. We're not looking for students to be compliant. We're not looking for students to be exposed to us doing work. We don't want them to experience how talented our teachers are. We want them to engage in academically rigorous tasks. We've continued to note that we need to be aligned to the Common Core standards, but also added this year that there are other content standards as well. We're not just talking about the Common Core state standards. They set out the standards in math and in reading and writing. It covers all of the subject areas, but we also have other subject areas. They have standards to which they are held and to which they work as well, whether it is science, social studies, PE, art, music. All of those standards are as important as the core standards. We continue to hold on to our history here, and that the work is integrated with the principles of learning, and it is measured by ongoing and diverse assessments, both formative and summative. We're not just talking about smarter balance here. We're talking about good instructionally based assessments and a nod to the teacher evaluation and good support of teachers in the classroom in general, observations with the Guilford Framework for Teaching and Learning. Essentially the same goal. It's about the student experience with some refinements to make it more specific to the work this year. Every year these evolve and grow without being cashed in. Priority 2, teaching and learning in this school system will be supported by subject area coaches and specialists. We've talked a lot about our local embedded professional development. We've grown that with a focus on mathematics this year. Instructionally focused leadership. Our administrative team is not a team of managers. They are a team of teachers and instructional leaders. And professional learning communities. We don't just expect our folks to be told what to do in a hierarchy. We expect them to work together and collaboratively and support each other. We've gotten great benefit from that. And important this year, instructional resources. Important for a couple of reasons. We know that we've invested significantly in a K-5 math resource that is new to us this year and will involve a lot of support of the teachers. But more broadly than that, we've heard in the comments here and in the survey that the community recognizes that our teachers need to be appropriately resourced. Professional development is part of that. Professional support is part of that, but making sure they have the tools and the resources. We've heard a lot that if we're going to do the Common Core well, we need to have the resources, the materials, the textbooks to do that. We've made a significant investment in time and dollars in a K-5 math resource. We're still looking for a 6 through 8 math resource, and we'll continue looking. But resources, instructional resources, are as important. And then in number 3, without changing much of the meaning here, we did make it a little more grammatically solid. Number 3, our schools will be safe and caring places for learning built upon positive relationships and healthy decision making. And Dr. Moore, as measured by survey data, we're going to continue to look at whether we create these emotionally and physically safe places with our climate survey, with our teacher evaluation survey, and maybe by adding some local questions to that as well. And that's how we'll hear from the community and continue to know that we're providing the safe, emotionally and physically safe place that we need to provide. I can hit the bullet list underneath. Our focus this year needs to be on expanding kindergarten to a full-day program successfully. Those students and those teachers are going to a new experience this year. We did work to get ready for that, but we need to continue to support that as it rolls out. The same can be said about math. We need to continue to expand math support through new resources and content-focused professional development. We have new resources at the K through 5 level. We have content-focused support from an IFL fellow in the 6 through 8 level, and we're still efforting filling that coaching position so that those folks have that coaching support as well. We've put a focus this year to continue to improve communication with parents in our community, as well as policymakers around the state. I believe that we have made efforts to do well in this area, but I believe we can continue to improve in this area, both ends of that coin, here locally at home with our community and with policymakers from your level on up. We need to improve our communication. And important this year to continue to develop an understanding of balanced assessment design and examine tools and resources to inform student achievement. We talked a little bit about assessment in our operations meeting. I may have gone a little off script at this moment, but assessments are designed with different purposes, and we need to know when we're using assessments and how we're using them. Formative classroom assessments are different than standardized statewide assessments, and we need to continue to work to make sure that our teachers have the support they need to use those tools properly. There are exciting new tools that are being provided. The digital library associated with Smarter Balanced is coming online this year. It is a nationwide resource of instructional and professional development resources that are being compiled. They're being juried, but they're being compiled by teachers all over the nation. They're being juried, and they're being cataloged and cross-referenced in ways that a third grade teacher could say, I'm tackling standard 3.5 next week in my classroom. What instructional materials are available in this digital library that would support my work with standard 3.5? And find what people have suggested from all over the country, but that's been vetted and juried before being posted. So it's not just going to Google and saying, find me a video on calculating the area of a triangle. It's going and being able to search it in a variety of different ways. And it's not just searchable by standard. You can go in and search by topic. You can go in and search by grade level. You can go in and search by all sorts of things. But the standard is one of the ways that you can go in and search. And it'll give teachers access to instructional materials, assessment materials, all sorts of things that they may never have had access to before. These things are going to be exciting, and we're going to have to make sure that we figure out what they mean, how we can best use them, and how we best give our teachers the time and the support they need to learn how to use those components. So that's our suggestion to the board. We spent a significant amount of time working on this as a leadership team, but these are your priorities. So we respectfully submit this as our suggestion to help get you started, and are happy to have take any direction or have any conversation that you'd like to have on this.
Yeah, and we don't have to do anything on this tonight, obviously. This can, if we want to think about it, look at it, tinker with it, that's fine. We can certainly do that.
I have one perhaps radical suggestion. I think, first of all, I think the priorities are, in terms of the categories, are good. The thing that has always seemed out of place to me as a non-educator is the word rigor.
I'm sorry, I missed
the
that.
word rigor.
Rigor.
Oh.
And in medicine, we think about rigor mortis, and and I looked it up, and I guess, you know, in academic circles, you know, it seems to have taken on its own meaning that, you know, educators and, you know, like I see it a lot in the edge-speak stuff, but for most people, you know, I looked up the general definition, and it's, you know,
Webster's
rigid,
definition has negative connotations.
strict, you know, and, you know, I was thinking about, well, what do we really want to say? And as we enter this time where we're trying to make sure that we're addressing all students at all levels, it just seemed to me like something like, you know, we will ensure that students are engaged in being appropriately challenged, or something like that.
Years ago, I had suggested, and in fact, I got into an argument with Richard Elmore over this, that as educators, we should be using the word vigorous instead of rigorous. I think it has, with positive connotations, it says the things that we want.
Now, I know you guys hear that, but I think for a public statement.
No, you're not listening. He's
sorry,
agreeing with you.
I'm agreeing with you. I am agreeing with you.
Okay.
However, these are the district priorities for this. When I came to Guilford.
You know whose word this was?
Yeah, no, I know.
Tom Forsella's, right. It was 100% his request to insert that into our
that's why it's a radical suggestion.
I don't think it's radical. I don't think it's radical at all.
It's steeped in educational research, and I agree. And the argument that I had with Richard Elmore was that I think that as educators, we took a word that had negative connotations and tried to force it into a positive box. However, I recognize that it's got a certain educational meaning right now, and you're right, not Webster's. You know,
and especially as we hear some comments anyway, where people feel like the teachers are being forced into more, you know, rigid ways of doing things, and the kids are having, you know, less flexibility. I think picking a word that, you know, encourages the flexibility that you talked about in the courier piece, for example. You know, as priorities.
It's one of our principles of learning too, academic rigor and a thinking curriculum, and that was a principle that we, you know, subscribe to, and that is really the hallmark of getting to critical thinking, deep thinking.
I'm not against rigor as I know you define it. I'm just saying it really means a challenge, right? Various things, but it's, you know, it's appropriately challenged and engaged. I mean, it's the way I view our priorities in terms of what we want to do with kids. We want to make sure that they are, you know, engaged in what they're doing, and that they are learning as much as they can while staying engaged. But that's just my suggestion.
Well, Dr. Myers has, with his clever iPad here, pulled up something from the Great Schools Partnership that said that it talks exactly about this. That it's educators use the word rigor. It's a rigorous learning experience helps students understand knowledge and concepts that are complex, ambiguous, or contentious, and help students acquire skills that can be applied in a variety of settings. Okay, that's what you mean. Right.
Absolutely.
But dictionaries define the term as rigid, inflexible, or unyielding.
That's
harsh. Unpleasant.
Yeah, likewise, they may use the term rigorous to describe learning environments that are not intended to be harsh, rigid, or overly prescriptive, but are stimulating, engaging, and supportive.
Right.
Why don't you use stimulating, engaging, and supportive? Right? I mean,
it's an interesting discussion about words and definitions here. I mean, in theory, it's modifying academics, so what words are we going to use to modify it in the way? We could also make a good case for deleting the word entirely and saying being engaged in academic tasks every day in every class.
Yeah, but I don't want them to be boring academic tasks. So
stimulating.
I think there needs to be a modifier.
Here's the words: stimulating, vigorous.
We've spent some considerable time defining rigor, academic rigor, at the district leadership level. We've done some definitions.
That's exactly the point, you know, is that the message to educators is one thing, the message to parents is maybe not what the educators want to try to convey. Right? I mean, so is there anything that conveys what you want to everybody?
Well, this definition here, updated August 14, says learning experiences that are academically, intellectually, and personally challenging. That's what you're really saying.
I think the difficulty for us comes in our almost 10-year history now with the principles of learning, and that we used those principles, and it's not Tom Frisella's word. Tom brought it to Guilford in his work with Dr. Keene and IFL. It came from the research of Lauren Resnick. It was built into, and so we've invested in this. I worry about a change. Before meeting the board in Guilford, I delivered a keynote where I talked about using the word vigorous rather than using the word rigorous. And I used Webster's definitions because I thought vigorous had all the positive connotations and it didn't have any of the negative connotations that rigorous had. Plus it rhymed, so it worked well for a keynote. But when I came and when I saw the work that had been done here in Guilford, I changed my vocabulary to honor the work that had been done for 6 years at that time. Now we're coming on 10 years, and we're building on the principles of learning. The Learning Walk training that we're going to take you through builds on the principles of learning. Dr. Keene is scheduling off-the-clock refresher sessions on accountable talk for staff members because we've had such turnover. We're going to be bringing staff members in on a day that we don't have school, because the new people coming in need to know about accountable talk and the principles of learning. So while I agree with you 100%, and in fact have been biting my lip for 3 years over this word, I worry about us asking the staff who have invested in this to change the language around which they're comfortable. And I think there's a time where it doesn't, well, I don't know, does it appear in our vision and mission, rigorous?
It's just becoming a buzzword. It's a buzzword that's losing its meaning because it's overused in the Common Core. It's just this term that is rigorous. It's losing its.
But when we're talking about supporting our teachers, and when we're talking about helping our teachers recognize that the work we're doing now is a continuation of work they've done before, I
guess the question of where we intend these priorities to be, presented. And from your perspective, they're going to the teachers as their priorities, and I get that. But from the board perspective, from my perspective, I'm hearing from parents, what is this rigor? Why does it have to be rigorous? And they don't get the history of the definition, which I didn't really until I started hearing it so much that it's different than the way I'm used to using it.
It goes to Bill's story. Bill told a story about somebody asking the kids, what's more important? Should learning be fun or should learning be hard?
Easier hard.
Easier hard?
Yeah.
Easier fun? Or
easier hard. Easy or hard. Yeah.
I said hard.
I mean, when you think about it, this is really an interesting question, right?
It's an enormously interesting question. And I think it's interesting that as they talked about it, they came around to the idea that there's room for both. That in fact, it's the more challenging it is, the more rewarding it can be. We're reading a piece now about sustainability and about how do you sustain change in a school system over time. And I worry about changing a word that is so seminally important, excuse me, to the community. And not just the teaching community. My first week here, I went to a Rotary luncheon, and the Rotarians were asking me about the principles of learning. I think that we've done a good job in Guilford for the last 10 years building understanding around that. I worry a little about the message we send to our teachers if in the middle of this transition with all this new sheet music, we start changing really important keystone words for them. And I absolutely agree on the point about, and I've been, my welcome back letter, the story in the Courier, the message at Convocation, and the first Our Direction message that's going to go out is about remembering to swing your shoulders, about the joy in the learning. Now it's pairing it with really hard work, but it's about the joy in the learning. I absolutely agree with you. If you go onto the Griswold Public Schools website, you don't find the word rigor anywhere. You find the word vigor all over the place. But I adapted when I came here because I was recognizing that to sustain the work that's been going on, you can't change it all the time. And I know we don't change it all the time, but that's a really important word, and I worry about just changing that one.
Well, we don't have to do this tonight, but
no, I know.
Maybe I can just suggest that you could keep the word if it's, I mean, it's whatever. I mean, if you're saying it's an important word for the purposes of the staff, okay. I mean, but why couldn't you say keep it exactly as it is, and then after the comma, or after tasks, just add Alan's language here, rigorous tasks that are stimulating, engaging, and supportive, or something like that. I sort of don't want to spend, you can't write something like this in committee, and that's exactly what we're doing.
I've just heard from more than one person that they have had enough of that word.
but it's, I mean, it is an odd word. You got to, from the point of view of the rest of us, it's.
I'm smirking because I agreed with you.
Yeah,
I changed myself to fit you guys on this one, and it's interesting to me that we're here now. But after working with the staff and the community here for 3 years now, culture and climate, I think I want to share the sustainability document with you guys. It's a really dense research piece, but it talks about climate and culture, and there are words that become ingrained in climate and culture, and then I worry about coming in and changing those words.
Do you have a leadership team meeting between now and the next board meeting?
Yeah. I can ask them.
Yeah, maybe just make a suggestion about, is there something we can do to add language to just explain what we mean by that, so that it says what it says to your audience, and it says what it says to our audience, if you will, right?
Even if we added those 3 words parenthetically after rigorous, because that clearly indicates that this defines our understanding of rigorous, and now we've got both. I don't think it answers Chris's question about, but we don't want our kids, but I think we're redefining a word, and we do that all the time. Language is organic, language grows. It is also in the first sentence of our vision. And so, again, we've got...
But language can also be insular. I mean, the medical profession is famous for that.
You think?
Not the legal profession.
Right. Yeah, acronyms. And something that may make a lot of sense to a room full of doctors or a room full of educators may, be obscure to somebody else who we're communicating. And this is a very public statement of our priorities. I mean, you may have different internal priorities with your teachers that, they totally understand what that means, but I still think that as a very public document and a word that people are hearing a lot, I mean, the one way to do it is to make sure that they understand what rigor is, but a lot of people just don't pay enough attention to, I've been on the board for 5 or 6 years, and I'm really just kind of understanding where rigor came from, and what it means to you.
But on a different priority, number 3, in light of our discussion before about start time and so on, I would like to see the word, our schools will be safe, healthy, and caring places for learning.
Have healthy a little bit later in the sentence,
Well, it
though.
says, yeah, but that's different. It says healthy decision-making, but I want the school to be healthy.
Right. No, I just worry about using the word healthy twice. In the
Well, you
same
don't want to use
sentence.
healthy twice. You have to change that,
Yeah.
the word before decision-making.
If we go down to initiatives,
Yep.
We have expanded kindergarten. I think that's confusing. We've expanded kindergarten to full
Right,
day.
but this is the year that we're implementing
Yeah,
that
the
expansion.
word should be implemented rather
Yeah,
than
it shouldn't be, right. I think it's just a little, I think it's a little confusing.
But I mean, this is the year where we're expanding kindergarten to full day.
We've done it already. It's done. As of day 1, it was done.
Right, after the first day, I see, right. Ann's talking about, it's the first year, we're doing it all year long.
No, I
Right,
understand that, but I mean, I
both
think if
points.
you're a
Yes,
parent,
yes.
you're like, I thought we did
I
that
thought we
last
did
year.
that
We
already.
voted in
Yes.
April. I'm just wondering if we could just find a more careful word choice, that's all. I get the point of it, I'm just,
Support the
just say
implementation,
implement.
right. Ensure successful, expansion, yes.
Support
Or
expansion.
just say
Implement works.
kindergarten to full day program.
and it's not very important to me. I'm interested that we took away increased capacity to support high-achieving students at a time when we are implementing and hiring someone to do just that. Why would we choose to delete that from last year?
The one from last year, we increased our capacity to support high-achieving students and other students with special needs within the district. That all went together as far as the special ed increasing the programs. That was around the initiative last year, and also we knew that last year is when we were going to put out some work around, getting a study.
Okay.
It took us a while to get there, and so that was the purpose of it last year.
But, to Katie's point, just like kindergarten didn't end when kindergarten's implemented. We're just at the beginning of understanding what that survey might say. As a board member, it's still a priority of mine. We don't have to settle this all tonight.
No.
Yeah, let me make this, we've got to change tape, so maybe we can just come to a conclusion on this. We've given you some suggestions, and maybe we can just carry this over to next month, and you give us some thoughtful language about.
We will try to capture some of what we've discussed today, or be ready to continue discussing if we recognize some of the comments, but don't necessarily draft all of them in, and then that'll allow you to make some final decisions.
Yeah, we can't negotiate this obviously in by email.
Right.
But if individuals want to send Dr. Freeman or Dr. Keene comments, that's perfectly fine.
We'll have a revised version for you at your next meeting.
Good. Why don't we take a short break then, so the tape can be changed.